Wishing everyone a very happy World Values Day. It is my privilege to welcome our distinguished speakers and our lovely audience to celebrate something very special, World Values Day. Values, which is the basic essence of humanity. We are proud to be celebrating this day in India from 2016 and reaching out to people to reflect on the values we hold, how they become practical in our lives, and how to put it in action. World Values Day provides an opportunity to check on our most deeply held values and explore and act on them with others. The celebration of World Values Day has been reaching out on Twitter alone to 75 million people across 67 countries. Many organizations, small, public, private, charitable, and commercial, have taken part in celebrations, including Volvo, Corn Ferry, PwC, and KPMG. Several events were organized which dealt with values in a multitude of contexts, including values in society, values in organizations and leadership, values in education, values in conversation, values in the arts, values in finance, values in the battle against corruption and malfeasance, values in reflection and meditation, and perhaps a first, values in cookery. Several events were hosted, including panel discussions and the international array of talking heads in the World Values Day Cafe, discussing the crucial role of values in opening our minds and hearts to opposing points of view in conversation and helping to bridge the deep divides caused by our prejudgments about others. This year, our theme is reconnecting with nature. We are all living through a time of enormous uncertainty and disruption. This means we need to deepen our understanding of values and how they connect us with our sense of self, with others, and how the wider crisis always brings out the best in us. Superficial concerns fall away, and we rediscover what really matters is our values. We have seen all over the world how people have come together to support each other and their communities with determination and courage. They have dug down their core values and put them into action. Reconnecting with nature is a wonderful way to connect ourselves emotionally and spiritually for our own existence. We must value nature as the core of our existence, as there is no greater teacher than nature itself. Today, we have a panel of eminent speakers from different fields who will share their views. I would now request Dr. H.P. Kanoria, Chairman, Universal Spirituality and Humanity Foundation, to address us. He is a renowned industrialist, banker, journalist, educationist, and philanthropist. Besides several humanitarian awards, he has been conferred the Global Man of the Year at the 3rd Annual Global Officials of Dignity Award. He is also the founder of the World Conference of Humanity, Power, and Spirituality, a global platform where humanity means spirituality, and much more. Dr. Kanoria.
Jai Bharat, Jai Vishwa. Good morning, good noon, good afternoon, good evening. I welcome all to this World Value Day celebration. So you can say, we are the children of God, the share of immortal bliss, holy and perfect beings. We are divinities on earth. Come up, O lion and lioness, and shake off the delusion. We are soul immortal, a spirit free, blessed and eternal. We are not matter, we are not body. Matter is our servant, not we the servant of the matter. Work hard till God is not pleased. Fear not. We lead on our soldier. Stop not. Look back for name and fame. So self overboard and work. Have faith in self, in all and God. Have muscles of iron and nerve of steel. Work for welfare of living beings and nature. Bear no hatred to anyone. God dwells in every heart. The resonates even more so today. With this world locked in battle against deadly disease, environment destruction, and civil and social unrest, it is extremely important that we remind ourselves of the true purpose of being and living on this earth. As every year, this year too, World Value Day resounds the call to deepen and strengthen our commitment to practice of value across the globe. Values are essential to our survival, but we do not always understand why. World Value Day presents us with an opportunity to reflect on the values we hold and how it impacts us and those around us. The theme for this year, reconnecting with nature. Reconnecting with nature during this time, when the restriction, many of us began to experience nature in different ways, paying attention in ways to the nature around us, in ways we had not before. Just 2 weeks into the lockdown, they had become fresher. The mountains came into view, wildlife came back, rivers and ponds began to clear up. It seemed that the lockdown, partial or incomplete, gave the earth some breathing room. Rivers, lakes, mountains, the air, wildlife, all got a new lease of life. So what happened was that we realized that we learned to value nature again. We vowed to her majestic at the same time. The big climate change event, flood, storm, and wide fires that rage across the world reminded us that the nature is all powerful. We must keep her needs in mind as we progress as individuals and society. For centuries now, we have been decimating nature. We had shown acute, careless disregard and respect to her needs, pillaging and plundering her bounty without greed. But what did she do? She showed us our true place on the earth and in the cosmos. Perhaps she took the form of virus to make us stop in our tracks and pay attention. In fact, I would say that we should go so far as to unitedly propose International Earth Relief Days in a year, days of sorrow, periods of planet lockdown, when we collectively choose not to emit carbon, any petrochemical, to halt all activity except the very essential. Let the earth be, give her some rest. In times of crisis, we are given a chance to see the travel and discover what truly matters. What matters is the bond that we share as human beings, the special relationship of humanity. It is this bond that carries us through troubled times and helps us survive and come out stronger. Across the world, people and communities have rallied together to beat the odds, and the results have been more than inspiring. It is our deeply held value that gives us the strength and determination to protect others and ourselves and fight the hard fights. In the Bible, God is pictured as creating plants and trees on the third day. God is depicted as gardener. In Hinduism, green is the sign of Wednesday, the day of Lord Ganesha, the remover of obstacles and benefactor of wisdom and prosperity. Anhat, the heart chakra, the chakra in the human body, is symbolized by the green color. It helps the heart, lungs, liver, circulatory system, skin and pancreas stay healthy. So it is recommended to have green vegetables. The national flag of India is the national flag of India wears the green color at the bottom. Islam has green flag. Quran says goodness has paradise where righteousness prevails. Due to the degradation of environment, the world is facing deadly diseases like COVID, floods, storms, and others. Rivers need to be protected. Throwing of garbage in the river needs to be stopped. Fruits-bearing plants having foliage throughout the year needs to be planted, even in Western. This will also mitigate hunger in many countries. Let us have and mark firm commitment on this World Value Day to have the value as enshrined by the Supreme Law. We have to ignite, inspire, and aspire the value among us, the youth and all. We have to save Mother Earth for inanimate and animate. We are aware of the global warming, glacier melting, ocean level rising high, and others. I thank you all for the gracious presence. Let us march onward together with the banner of value, protection of Mother Earth. Thank you all. My good wishes. May God bless all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Kanuria, for your deliverance and giving some lovely examples of how we can actually practice values in action in our lives and how to connect with nature. Our next speaker today is Mr. Paul Palmarosa. He has worked in management positions for 51 of his 56 years business career in the US and Europe. In the 1980s, he founded an e-learning company, which in 2001 became publicly listed on the London AIM Stock Exchange. For 48 years, Paul has been a member of an education charity offering programs in economics and philosophy based on both the teaching of the both Western and Eastern spiritual traditions. He was the director of a charitable operations Sanskrit St. James in 2013. He founded If I Can CIC, a community interest company, which provides the free If I Can Values app, offering daily reminders about 5 natural values, an ethical entrepreneur, an ebook about values in business. He is currently a guest lecturer at Regent's University in London. He has written 5 books, with the latest being Cultural Cycles and Climate Change, which we are going to inaugurate today for the first time in India. Paul, over to you.
Thank you. Let me make the share. So, can we all see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, I'm going to take you on a brief journey through the content of this book, which gives us some useful insights into why we are facing this climate change crisis now, and also to offer a direction on the way forward. So we're going to look first at some aspects of history, because if we look at history properly, we can learn some lessons. And that's what we're going to see. What lessons can we learn? To do this, we're looking at time not as a linear process, but the fact that time works in cycles. So all the planets move and we get days and months and years, etc. And also it's said that the planets have some influence. So if you look at the full moon, now what we're going to do is look, we've discovered a unique cycle for cultures, and we've looked at not only our Western culture, but the Indian, Chinese, and Arabic cultures over 2,500 years. And you're going to find it's a very interesting, that's what's been revealed. The way forward means we honestly acknowledge the problems, and we then spend more quiet time, more coming to rest of the mind and being, so that we can make better decisions. It'll then be clear that living natural values, this is an important aspect, as Rahul said, in life, but live the natural values. And in doing so, we'll serve. And one of the key areas to serve is climate change, is reconnecting with our values and reconnecting with nature. Now, one aspect of history which was quite useful, and we've made much research and many people have been involved in developing this work over, it's actually been going for about 40 years. Sir John Glubb wrote a book, The Fate of Empires, where he looked at 11 empires over about 2,500 years. And an empire, in his view, was 250 years. And he looked at it, again, with all cultures, because his quote was, the teaching of history should include the history of the human race, not just our culture. And we've learned some interesting lessons following that direction. Now, a couple of interesting things he found: too long a period of wealth and power inevitably leads to decadence. And this is a key aspect of any cycle. You have a rise, but there is then a fall. And the negative period in the history of cultures, this is his view, are marked by rigid forms of government, extensive bureaucracy, poor leadership, and a reluctance to change. Does that sound familiar? Now, our project began back in the 1980s when a lady, Ms. Sheila Rosenberg, a historian and the literary editor of the Times Education Supplement, proposed a 900-year cultural cycle. Now, at the time, I was a member of the Jyotish study group. The Jyotish is the Indian astrology, and it's been going for thousands of years, and it's a very precise, it's a mathematical science. And we looked at what planetary pattern could explain an 900-year culture. And what we discovered, looking and discovering the conjunctions of the two biggest planets, Jupiter and Saturn, they come conjunct in the sky, actually every 20 years. And we said, when do they come conjunct at the same point in the heavens, the same star? And it was 854 years. So we started our process. Now, let's look at what a cycle is. As something rotates, when you project that out on a timeline, you get this format. This is a wave, and you'll see an upper outward cycle, and then a downward and inward cycle. For those of you familiar, there's something called the left brain. So the human brain works intellectually, outwardly, etc., and then inwardly, more emotionally, contemplatively, etc. And we're going to see how this manifests. So these two planets, as I mentioned, and the other interesting fact is these come conjunct every 20 years, and for quite a long period, there'll be in air signs like Aquarius, etc. Now, the quality of air is it's a new idea, it's a new impulse, and that begins this cycle. And then water, you spread it around. Then fire, the peak, but then it begins to go down, and it closes and concludes in an air period. So if we look at this period now, this is from 1246 AD to 2100. This was the Renaissance. This was the period of Renaissance in the Western culture. And then in the West, the European countries started to travel around the world by sea, and they do it originally for commerce, then colonize, and then convert. And then came the fire period, the Industrial Revolution, the fire, the enlightenment. And now things started to go down. And on the 21st of December, 2020, there was a conjunction in the earth signs. And from now on, all the conjunctions of these planets for the next, 100 and so years is going to be in earth signs, which will give a certain quality to us. Now, let's look at something stuck here. Yeah, here we go. Here's the 3 cycles that we looked at for all the cultures. So in the West, you started off in the period an upward and outward cycle with the teachings of Plato and Socrates and Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, the Roman Republic, and then the Roman Empire peaking at 180 AD, and then the fall of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire during this period. And it's interesting to note at this period of time, the values were wealth, power, fame, and pleasure. Again, does that sound familiar? So these are some lessons we might learn. The West then had to go into an inward movement called the Dark Ages, Middle Ages. In this monastic movement, hundreds of thousands of people around Europe were meditating, contemplating. There were 1,000 monasteries in the UK alone. But this became more rigid, and then came the Renaissance. And this is the current cycle that I just showed you. Now, what happened, and this was very interesting, when the West was going inside, the Chinese culture, after having a lot of confusion here, but still a spiritual regeneration, Lao Tzu and Taoism, Confucianism, and eventually Buddhism, and that began to manifest positively around the world. And intellectually, there was this peak of prominence in the Chinese culture. There was a cohesiveness as well. But then things started to get weak and they went into their inward and downward period. The same thing happened with the Arab culture, Mohammed. And in a short period of time, they had an empire almost as big as the Roman Empire. And they were working in science and algebra and all sorts of developments. They in fact, translated all the works of Plato before the West did, from the Greek into access. But then they went into a more inward and less powerful state. And also the Indian culture, the same pattern. So the West is one pattern, and these other 3 cultures were another pattern. Now, about the Indian, it was very vital during this period, this Gupta Empire, some call it the classic age of India, science and art began to flourish. And there was Buddhism was supported by the Gupta Empire, coexisted with Hinduism, an inclusiveness. And then in the 8th century, a Vedic spiritual renewal led by Adi Shankara, which was spread all around the country. Then in the 9th and 12th century, ruled by 2 dominant dynasties, it was a golden age. Now, the thing I've observed in my studies of Sanskrit and the Indian culture was that in their inward period, look at the names of all these sages whose teachings have got to the West. They were, it's been part of the globalization aspect. And during this economic period where, India's been controlled by Moguls and British, etc., all this spiritual work was going on. Now, let's look at these 9 steps going forward. Honestly acknowledge the problems, more quiet time, and live the values. What do you think these are some of the problems? This is a quick summary, but one of them is very important: excess. As Sir John Glubb said, when you get all this power, excess is almost inevitable. So you had excess of food, drink, drugs, sexual pleasure, Another element is me, overemphasis on my rights instead of my duties. It's me. And this is the excess of freedom. I'm not sure what's happening there, but now in business, this whole question of short-term personal gains. In business, this is one of the main causes of climate change. Now, what are some indicators of defects? A growing disparity between rich and poor, a breakdown of the family unit, which is the core of any culture, high degrees of stress, tension, and mental disease, and little or no religious practice. Now, we have to acknowledge that. If we do, this more quiet time involves us shifting attention away from assuming wealth, power, fame, and pleasure are going to make us happy. And we need to seek true happiness within. Again, I'm not sure why all these marks are on here. Now, so we need to give the mind more rest, surrendering the ego-based ideas and feelings. They're like clouds that cover. Our true nature is like the sun. It's always shining, but it gets covered over by clouds, and they have to come off. And we begin to nourish the spiritual dimension of our being, which tends to be ignored when we focus on the material realm only. So, what's recommended is meditation, and when regularly practiced, it can recharge fine energy and give a real experience of inner peace and happiness. I've been meditating almost 46, 47 years now, and twice a day. And while it's not that experience completely all the time, there have been enough experiences of it for me to be sure that it is so. And it's available within. I don't have to get it outside. And the same with mindfulness exercises, coming into the present moment. And it gives greater balance and clarity to life. This is very practical too. Just attend to the work in the moment. Then reflect, consider some of these issues and have useful dialogues with others, not discussions where you're trying to make your point and win the argument, but where two people offer their views in search of truth. Then silence, where we need to quiet the mind, and it helps to dislodge these habitual desires and distractions which we tend to follow. I was taken by my uncle to a weekend silent retreat when I was about 17 years old. And it was a game changer because I experienced this tremendous clarity. And I've been attending, he and I attended each year while I was living in America that weekend. I now attend at least 1 week of silence each year, sometimes more. You really do experience the clarity. You get rid of all the busy noise. So the next key point, obviously, is the values. And then naturally serving the climate change. Now, I'm only able to give you a very short summary now, but this is the model, if you will, that is used in the apps that I'm offering and in the book in more detail. It shows how natural human values, which are the same for all spiritual traditions and philosophic traditions, and many secular acknowledge it as well. We need to have our life guided by these values, how we think, how we relate to others, and how we act. Now, here's just a sample of them. There's many more in the book. Establish a balanced state of mind when making decisions. The related values are stillness and inner silence, self-control and calmness. When you live that, the self-control, the calmness, the mind stays more steady. Now, how we relate to others, a key element. Be truthful and transparent in all our dealings with ourselves and others. So truth, honesty, integrity, and trust. Now, how we act. We need to put this into practice. We need to inspire others by our actions based on natural values, thus setting a fine example. This should be, for example, the characteristics of our leaders: selfless, loving, and caring, and humble. We don't find many of these type leaders around, but this is the way they really should be going, as opposed to how much money I'm making and what power I have. So, serving the common good, we do need an individual resolve to fulfill one of the important purposes of our life, to serve the needs of others. It begins by seeing the need, opening the heart and mind to find the best way to serve. And this way, life becomes more we than me. I think of it, Churchill has said, you make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give. So, as the final stage of the book, I was so fortunate to meet the Matthew Pye and to read his book, Plato Tackles Climate Change, and he's going to speak more about that. I also had the blessing to read Satish Kumar's book, The Spiritual Compass, which is one aspect. He's going to broaden it out. And the whole aspect, we've heard more and more about what the causes are, what the problems are. But I'm going to leave this to the other speakers. The book does go into it in some degree, and also some of the personal resolutions that are needed. We have to really, everyone has to actually do something. So that is the quick summary and go through, and I, like you, will be very interested to hear how the other speakers proceed with more detail. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for your very interesting research and deliverance on the matter. And now I would request Dr. H.P. Kanoria to launch this book in India, Cultural Cycles and Climate Change. May I request Dr. H.P. Kanoria to launch this book? I think there we can see him with your book there, which just taken off the ribbon. And all the very best from all of us, the launch of this book. And I'm sure that many people will be reading this to get an insight on all the interesting facts which you have put together. So thank you, Paul, for that.
Yes, could you just mention it's been published by Motilal Banarsidass, one of the...
Yes, it has been published by Motilal Banarsidass, one of the reputed publishers in India. So it's available also in Amazon. If I'm right, Paul, I think it's available to everyone. Well, I have my copy here, all right. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Paul.
It's also been published in the US and in the UK, if there are any people attending from them. All right, thank you very much.
Great, so we come to our next speaker, Matthew Pye, who has been a teacher for over 20 years, first in the UK, then Germany, and now for 14 years in Brussels. For over a decade, he has worked with leading scientists in sustainability with a focus on climate change, most notably in collaboration with Michael Wadley, Oscar winner, Woodstock 1970, and Birgit van Munster, IPCC expert reviewer. He established the Climate Academy in 2011. This innovative work to hothouse gifted and talented students in the science and social realities of climate change was recognized by the offer of full membership to the Club of Rome chapter in 2016. Their latest project, The Writings on the Wall, aims to go viral to bring clarity and depth to media reporting on the climate crisis. The focus of this artistic project is the concept of Cut 11%, a climate change index that has been endorsed by the world's most eminent climate scientists. I think Matthew will brief us more on this particular project. Matthew, over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Paul, for your beautiful words. And in fact, I'm sure if you were a student of Plato, he would have been proud of you. So much of what you said is very deeply resonant with what Plato thought and wrote about. So as you can see on the screen, I'm a teacher in a school. I'm in a school now. It's my classroom. And I have the privilege of working with young people, and these young people have inherited an extraordinary economy. We're in Europe. We live such luxurious, comfortable lives like that. And if we look back at the last cycle that Paul was talking about, indeed, this is the most phenomenal expansion in human technology and so on. So if you go to the next slide, Paul, you can see there's a ship. And this is, in a way, the ship that civilization is, we have been on. And Plato's got a lot to say about this ship in a moment. But the one thing, there's a famous speech by J.F. Kennedy that he gave at a university once to well, of course, lots of students. And he talked about GDP. And his reflections about GDP were that really it said everything about nothing, that really what we value and what makes us fully human can't be accounted for inside GDP. And really the point of what that's really the theme of what I'm going to just talk about in the next 10 minutes, that we have achieved this astonishing physical, technological progress, but it shouldn't be a surprise to find out that in the background to that, we have missed some absolutely fundamental natural boundaries, and we've missed some absolutely fundamental human values. So first I'm going to talk about these natural boundaries for 5 minutes, and then I'll talk about the values that are missing in this picture. So next slide. What you can see in this graph is the level of CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. And we are at a level now which is unprecedented in 4 million years. And as you can see from those oscillations in CO2 levels, we've broken out of a very deeply entrenched, stable environment. And that, of course, is caused by the burning of fossil fuel. In fact, there was a report this week that emphasized that now it's 99.9% sure. Well, it doesn't matter what the cause is, we're in deeply troubling waters if this is our civilization's ship. So if you go to the next slide, science knows about these levels of CO2 to a great level of precision, and it's called the Keeling curve. And every day we measure these things, and so it's known very precisely exactly what we're doing. But the thing is that when we talk about 1.5 or 2 degrees, it's hard to imagine what that looks like or what the significance of that is. And there's a very simple metaphor which I often use, which is about a baby's temperature, or in fact any temperature. That's my son there, that's little Antoine. If I had a temperature of 2 degrees now, I would probably have to cancel being here on the call, because I would feel like very drained and sleepy. Well, if you're doing that across the board at an ecological level to every living species, you're fundamentally changing the operating system. It's like slamming your laptop to suddenly try to function 300 volts rather than the usual 220. So it's simply not possible to do this. So there are safe limits which are known to science. If we go to the next slide, I've got those there. You can picture this in terms of buckets. For 1.5 degree, if you just go to the next slide, Paul, there's a bucket there of 233 gigatons. So that's how many gigatons we have left before we go over one of these important natural boundaries. And on the left, you can see there's lots of people. That's us, kind of Lego people, in a way kind of symbolic, I think. And we are emitting 42 gigatons of carbon every year. So if you divide that 233 by the 42, you can see that we're about 6 years away from treading over one of these dangerous limits. And the 2 degree limit is about 12 years away, roughly. And again, if you see in the news, we have no plans at the moment to decelerate. we're still accelerating our emissions. It's extraordinary. Governments are still subsidizing fossil fuels and not the opposite. We are not only on the wrong path, we're going deeper into the wrong path. So if you go to the next slide, there we come back to the ship. And here you can see on board our democratic ship, we have a crew. And in my book, Plato Tackles Climate Change, I have a chapter about this. The crew it's like a drunken pleasure cruise. The only thing that they're interested in is swaying the opinions of this blind and deaf captain who's got no clue about the art of navigation. He doesn't understand the stars or the winds. And the one person on board who does understand these things, the navigator, he represents the philosopher who has a full view of everything. Now, this is really what we're doing now. We have a drunken pleasure cruise of capitalism and democratic rule, which is just driven by popularity, and we have no map about where we're up to. The media is also not reporting the truth clearly. Very few people, when you watch reporting on Glasgow, they talk as if 1.5 is, sort of doable. Well, it's so difficult. The demands that we have to do to get inside that budget are groundbreaking. They have to be groundbreaking. So that is the truth. Philosophy is always attentive to data, to empirical data. This is the data for climate change, and this is the deep water that we're in. So yes, we've had astonishing economic growth. We've even got a whole geological epoch named after us, the Anthropocene. And so we are heading into deep waters. This wave, the cartoonist for my book on Plato, a former student, he captured it a bit like the Japanese famous oil painting, water painting. Okay, next slide. So the last 5 minutes, I'll just talk about the way to go forward. So the thing is, if I talk about this navigator, what does he actually look like? I mean, what's he actually do? Well, at the most basic level, a navigator is somebody who puts reason above desires, that basically we need to have a rational map of where we're going. You cannot break these natural boundaries. Just like what Paul was saying in terms of this downgoing thing, that a world full of egoism, of excess, etc. Reason should tell us in a very clear voice that this is not sustainable. Now, the project that was mentioned very kindly in the introduction is cut 11%, and I'm not going to go into the details now. You can find it on the internet. But cut 11% gives us the data for every country and what they have to reduce to stay within these boundaries. The fact that there's no index in the world for climate change is an astonishing omission. We have indexes for everything, for GDP, we have them for gold, for oil prices, for CAC 40, FTSE 100, but the most fundamental barometer of all economy and all life on Earth, we have no index. And that tells you everything, I think, about the type of boat that we're on. Nobody's listening to the navigator. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, capitalism is not concerned with, and economics in its crudest sense is not concerned with externalities. It's not concerned with external costs, natural boundaries, etc. It's simply there for profit in its crudest form. And it's also not a surprise that it happens inside a democracy. I'm not here to make any detailed analysis of either capitalism or democracy right now, but the basic point is that they're not set up, they're not wired, it's not in its DNA to look at these natural boundaries. So next slide, just 2 more slides to go. This is Plato's image, not inside the Republic, but in another work. And the black horse represents our desires. It's like a stubborn horse that doesn't listen to reason. And I once had a party with my daughter once, and we mistakenly rented ponies, but the ponies just didn't want to go anywhere. So we kind of had like 20 minutes stood by a pony that didn't want to move because they just wanted to eat the grass, not go on a walk. And in a way, that's like one of the natural things about the human condition. We have to drag this pony to think about bigger things. And there we have a white horse sailing off into and this is the component of being a human. And really on World Values Day, this is the white horse, which really matters. So the charioteer, the poor charioteer stuck in the middle there, he represents the philosopher. Hi, you just have to wait. Just 5 minutes. No, sorry, I'm in a school. So if you go down one final slide. So what Plato is saying is that the full human being is a human being which has a spirit, has a thumos. And what's extraordinary about Plato is that thumos, up to that point in Plato's, in the ancient Greek civilization, it was all about warfare, about battle. Thumos, the idea of spirit, was all about pride and revenge and things like that. And Plato domesticated Homer's understanding of thumos and made it into the service of the polis. And that's exactly what we have to do now. For climate change, we have to reconnect with those values of service, and we have to diminish all those nationalistic voices, if you like, militaristic voices, because our thumos has been captured by capitalism to simply be concerned with status or concerned with nationalism and separatism and individualism. And that is what Plato, in terms of being a full picture, that's what we have to do in our society. So the last slide. As a teacher in a school, I can see students have just walked in. Sorry, yeah, that's it. I work with a climate academy, and the first job of the climate academy that I run is to train the students in understanding the natural boundaries, the limits of our economic progress, where those boundaries are. And the second thing to do is, once they have that, to inspire them to transform the civic space around them with values and all the things that Paul said before, a beautiful summary of the sorts of things that we do within the academy. So World Values Day, it's all about reconnecting not only with nature, but things which make us our full selves. Like, what is it that really inspires us? And those things are not material. They're to do with family, they're to do with artistry, with having projects, and it's nothing to do with the material. So there is no conflict between the natural boundaries and human life. We just have to have a fuller view of who we are as human beings. So that's my little contribution.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you very much for your very interesting and enlightening presentation on the matter. We move on to our next speaker, and we have with us Kirsty Gogan, who is a highly specialized international consultant offering thought leadership, strategy development, and techno-economic expertise focused on multiplying and accelerating zero carbon technology options available for large-scale, affordable, market-based decarbonization of the global economy over a wide range of future scenarios. Kirsty is also co-founder with Eric Ingersoll of Terra Praxis, a new non-profit organization working with an extensive global network to define, incubate, and initiate scalable strategies that fulfill the twin missions of prosperity and decarbonization. Kirsty's volunteer work includes chairing the UK government's Nuclear Innovation Research and Advisory Board, NIRAB, the Cost Reduction Working Group. She also co-founded, is now a board member of Energy for Humanity, an environmental NGO focused on large-scale, deep decarbonization and energy access. Kirsty also sits on the board of the US NGO Nuclear Innovation Alliance and French NGO Voices of the US National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. Recently appointed her to serve on a new committee to identify opportunities and barriers to the commercialization of new and advanced nuclear energy technologies over the next 30 years. Over to Kirsty now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here, and I've found all of the contributions so far incredibly inspiring. So it's a real honor to participate in this conversation. May I just check that you're seeing my slides? Okay, wonderful. Well, I guess so Paul invited me very kindly to talk about about climate change, and I guess the sort of first thing that I might say is that history may judge the way that we have characterized climate change as an environmental issue when actually really it's a humanitarian issue. And ultimately, the climate problem is really an energy problem. So I'll be looking at that through that lens. So firstly, a bit about Terra Praxis, which is the non-profit organization that we founded last year. You can see here that we have sort of 3 core principles. Firstly, really sort of designing very ambitious strategies and solutions that are designed to meet the scale of the climate challenges that we face. It's quite difficult for humans, I think, to really appreciate the scale of our impact on the planet. We've been hearing some wonderful articulations of that through the discussion already. Really sort of understanding the scale of our energy use, and then understanding our very deep dependence on fossil fuels, really for every aspect of our lives, is very difficult. To appreciate 100 million barrels of oil per day, these are very large amounts. So we tried to design strategies that are, equivalent in scale, in order to achieve the decarbonization required within the very challenging timescales that are needed. Fully decarbonize the global economy within 28 years, and then of course meet rising global energy demand, which may require us not only to entirely replace our existing energy infrastructure, but potentially double or even triple it. So in order to achieve that, we collaborate at every stage and seek to apply an incredibly inclusive, empathic approach to the development of the solutions, because if they're to succeed, then we really need to work very closely with everybody who will be involved and affected by those solutions. And ultimately, our motivation is to prevent suffering and create resilience and protect nature, for both the sort of planet, but also to enable prosperity. Because today, although most of the world's population live safer, more comfortable, longer, healthier, more productive lives than ever before, more than half of the population currently lacks access to enough electricity, and almost 1 billion people lack access to electricity at all. By 2040, some forecasts suggest that number of people who lack access to any electricity at all could increase to 3 billion people. And not only did half the population lack that access to electricity, but quite rightly aspire to the energy-rich lives, not only for household use, but also for modern energy services that many of us take for granted, including water sanitation, refrigeration, industry, street lights. So access to electricity really must grow. Today, nearly 3 billion people cook over open fires fueled by wood or dung or coal or charcoal, and the health consequences of this are really severe. Indoor air pollution causes 2 million premature deaths per year, 1 million cases of chronic lung disease, and half of all pneumonia deaths among children under the age of 5. And according to the World Health Organization, that bad air pollution caused from cooking alone is actually responsible for 4 million premature deaths per year. It's more than the toll from malaria, from tuberculosis combined. It's really, the World Health Organization has said, the single most important environmental health risk factor worldwide is burning fuels inside the home for cooking and light. And it's also a feminist issue. Girls in households that cook with polluting fuels could spend up to 35 hours a week collecting wood and water. There was a survey in Ghana that found that women spend 3 times as many hours per week collecting wood as men do, and they spend 10 times as many hours cooking. So this is really an effect not just on health that disproportionately impacts women and children in the home, but also massively impacts the productivity of women throughout the world. Once another survey of 700 rural households in Himachal Pradesh in northern India found that women were walking on average 2 kilometers to collect wood, finding and harvesting and transporting fuel to keep the hearth fires burning took an average of 40 hours per month. So the question really we should be asking is, where is the energy going to come from? And the answer is, right now, it's mainly from coal. Because despite spending 25 years of successfully building public and political support for action on climate change, we have not made a dent on the upward trajectory of carbon emissions. And actually, they're projected to just continue rising, and the share of fossil fuels to continue dominating the energy mix. And you can see on the right there that although we may be successful in decarbonizing electricity generation thanks to wind and solar, there are very stubborn, tough to decarbonize parts of our economy remaining in industry, in heavy transport, and in heating. So what do we need to do? Well, this has to change by 2050. So 28 years from now, we have to reduce carbon emissions to net zero globally, or face really severe, irreversible consequences. We have a lot to do in a very short time. We need to repower all of our coal plants, replace our flexible gas plants to complement renewables in clean electricity grids. We need to replace gas with new fuels for industrial heat, replace liquid fossil fuels, and of course, grow the energy system to meet rising global energy demand, because access to energy is profoundly important for our quality of life. Now, by 2050, my daughter will be the age that I am now. So sometimes when I look at that chart, it seems a little bit abstract. And then when I remember that actually my daughter will be the age that I am now within this deadline, it really makes the deadline come into sharp relief. I want to be able to look my daughter in the eyes and tell her that there was no solution that I didn't consider in the battle against climate change. Because it's really bad already. Already, ice shelves the size of Manhattan Island are breaking away from the crumbling coastal shelf as the air and the sea are warming. We're already experiencing frequent extreme weather events, heat waves, droughts, heavy rainfall with floods, ocean acidification, and potentially face a catastrophic mass species extinction by the end of the century. We're working right now with President Nasheed, former president of the Maldives, the ambassador for the Climate Vulnerable Forum, and high priority is resilience to climate impacts and opportunities for clean energy growth that will increase that resilience to climate whilst enabling decarbonization and prosperity. Effects already on humans, we're seeing increasing threats to food security from decreasing crop yields, forced migration, conflict, the abandonment of populated areas due to rising sea levels, not only in the climate vulnerable countries, but in industrialized modern economies in the United States. Here, for example, you see the devastating effects from Tropical Storm Harvey in Texas back in 2017. The scale and the complexity of global warming and its causes and its impacts, they're so large, we really don't have the mental apparatus to respond to an abstract problem like climate change. It's not really a threat that we're evolved to respond to, like a tiger coming into our village. I've been watching the response to COVID, for example, and in the UK, we were watching what was happening in Italy, and we were just 2 weeks behind when, when our hospitals would become overwhelmed and we would be going into a very severe lockdown that would last for months. And even when we were 2 weeks away from that happening, we had a sense of exceptionalism. We couldn't really believe that it would happen to us until it did. And this taught me a lot about the way that humans perceive risks. And the other sort of interesting finding for me about the response to COVID was, well, two things. Firstly, that that actually we eventually did treat it globally as an emergency, and our scientific communities, political leaders, communities around the world responded as though it was an emergency, took the measures necessary to begin to protect our populations from the pandemic, but also to develop good answers, good solutions in terms of the vaccine, unprecedented speed of the development of the vaccine. So when we really see it as an emergency and act like it's an emergency, then we can actually achieve great things together as a human population. But although we call the climate emergency an emergency, we are not yet acting like it's an emergency. And the real risk is that we will drift into normalizing these impacts. You know, as we've seen huge changes in our behavior and our norms throughout the course of the pandemic, very quickly we have adopted new behaviors, wearing masks, social distancing, isolating, self-isolation. All of these things that previously would have been unimaginable to so many people are now very normal. The risk is that the climate emergency is a cumulative problem. So really we can't wait until it's got bad and say, okay, now let's solve it, because then it will be too late. The climate system has a really large inertia. The effects will persist, not only for decades or centuries, but actually for thousands of years to come. So this is really where leadership comes in. This is why we really need political leaders to pay attention to this path that we're on, and develop you know, meaningful solutions that can achieve the scale and the pace of change required. So on that, I have a couple of solutions to share with you that we're working on, and we take some inspiration from the Impossible Burger, which is a plant-based meat substitute that's available in every fast food restaurant in America. It looks like a burger, it tastes like a burger, it costs the same as a burger, and it doesn't require any behavior change, but it has it comes with the sort of benefits of the sort of ethical and environmental benefits of no longer needing the animal. And that's kind of our theory of change for what we need in our climate solutions. We need drop-in substitutes that are, you know, equivalent to fossil fuels in terms of their cost and their performance, and that can, you know, reuse as much of our existing infrastructure as possible in terms of the end-use infrastructure and the storage and distribution infrastructure, to really reduce the costs associated with the transition, to reduce the disruption, and to reduce dependence on behavior change. So here are 4 impossible burgers for climate. The first is a flexible generator that can complement wind and solar and future electricity grids, that displace gas plants, displace the fossil fuels that we currently rely on. We're experiencing a huge energy crisis right now, which has really exposed the folly of over-dependence on gas. From the point of view of price volatility, security of supply, and, you know, of course, the associated environmental and public health impacts of dependence on fossil fuels. So this is a thermal energy storage system attached to an advanced heat source that has no emissions, but which can flexibly supply electricity that will load following with wind and solar. The second is cogeneration of power and heat and hydrogen, which is a great value proposition in our future energy systems, because of course decarbonization is about more than electricity. It's also about the other 80% of our energy use outside the electricity sector, which is largely supplied by liquid fuels today, and is very difficult to decarbonize. So the production of hydrogen using these advanced heat sources has a very small environmental footprint and can supply hydrogen in a very low cost manner that could then be used directly or as an ingredient for drop-in substitute fuels, such as ammonia, for example, in shipping, but with the option to switch and supply power directly to the grid during seasonal lulls, for example, of renewables. And you see the offshore platform there is a platform that we've designed to be moored off the coast of, you know, a developing country like Ghana, for example, or India, or it could be, you know, located anywhere in the world in a coastal region. And this platform is producing power and heat and hydrogen and enough fresh water to supply the entire city region of Accra. So this also has the great benefit of avoiding the need for terrestrial infrastructure projects, and is also extremely low cost and can meet a variety of energy needs. It could actually also make protein. So you could end up with power and heat and hydrogen and fresh water and protein. So these really are, you know, sort of energy for humanity platforms, you could say. The next impossible burger for climate is a repowering of existing coal plant infrastructure. Coal currently produces almost half of our global carbon emissions, and it's still projected to be about 2 terawatts of coal operating by the end of by 2050, which just on its own would completely blow our remaining carbon budget. So this is really the single biggest source of carbon emissions on the planet, and is a very high priority since more than half of the global fleet is less than 14 years old. There's $1 trillion of unrecovered capital in those plants, and you know, the communities, it would be devastating for communities to shut down those plants, to lose all of the socioeconomic benefits, to lose the supply of reliable electricity, to lose all of the jobs, to lose that scale of investment in infrastructure is really kind of unrealistic to expect that we're going to just abandon those assets. So our strategy here is to replace the coal boiler with a new heat source that means there's no more emissions, but that the coal plant infrastructure, the turbine hall and the transmission continue to be used, which means it's a very low cost and a very fast transition option, and also protects nature by reducing the extent of new clean generating infrastructure that needs to be built. And the final one is dedicated hydrogen production, and this is really refinery scale production of clean liquid fuels, which could be adopted by any country, which creates huge opportunities for economic development, energy independence, and increased prosperity within those nations. So this is something that's being taken very seriously and of great interest to many countries around the world that currently spend, you know, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars on importing fossil fuels. So of course, all of these impossible burgers are designed to target this, you know, stubborn upward trajectory of emissions and be delivered within the 28 years. I'll just stop here with one final slide, which shows the land area requirement that would be required if you wanted to actually replace, for example, the UK's current oil and gas consumption, either with offshore wind, which is shown in pink, or solar, which is shown in the yellow bar. You see here that renewables are fantastic, but they are very land intensive or sea intensive, and therefore we shouldn't necessarily expect that we can do it all with wind and solar. And this is why we look at the advanced heat source option, which has, as you can see by the tiny green dot, a tiny environmental footprint, enabling that important transition, the continued role of energy in our well-being and our prosperity, but without the emissions. So I'll stop there, and I very much appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsty, for the very detailed and interesting presentation and how we are battling against climate change and threats, and detail that was very profound. Thank you very much for that.
It's my pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for joining us here. And now I would like to move to our next speaker, Mr. Satish Kumar, a very interesting background, who is a peace pilgrim, a lifelong activist and former monk. He has been inspiring global change for over 50 years, from the age of 9. He renounced the world and joined the wandering Jain monks. Inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, he decided at 18 that he could achieve more back in the world and soon undertook a peace pilgrimage, walking without money from India to America in the name of nuclear disarmament. Now in his 80s, Satish has devoted his life to campaigning for ecological regeneration, social justice, and spiritual fulfillment. He has founded the Schumacher's College, as well as the Resurgence Trust, an educational charity that seeks a just future for all. Over to Satish.
Thank you, Rahul, for your wonderful introduction and welcome. And it is my pleasure to be part of this event. And World Values Day, I would like to talk about the value of nonviolence in the context of climate change. Why we have climate crisis? Because humanity has been very violent to nature. Waste is violence. Pollution is violence. Destroying biodiversity is violence. Emitting so much carbon which biosphere and atmosphere cannot sustain, and putting all these greenhouse gases into the atmosphere is violence to nature. And so if we were to adopt the value of non-violence, which means doing no harm to nature, then we can address the issues of climate change. All technologies, all other political methods can go only that far. But unless we change our attitude and we accept our limits and practice the principle and the value of non-violence to nature. And actually non-violence to nature is also connected with the non-violence to people. We are as exploitative of people as we are exploitative of nature. So I would say social injustice is violence, institutionalized violence. Poverty is violence. When we are wasting 30 to 40% of food in the world, while hundreds of thousands of children and people are going hungry, going to bed without food, that is clearly a violence to people. And also we are violent to ourselves. All the speakers who have spoken before me, we have spoken about these things as well. We are violent to ourselves. The me culture that Paul talked about, the ego, anger, fear, anxiety, all these are violence to ourselves. So I would like to say that in this World Values Day, for me, the most fundamental, the most important, the most pertinent, the value is value of non-violence. Non-violence to ourselves, non-violence to other people, and non-violence to nature at all three levels. Now, this learned listening community in front of me, I don't need to go in too much detail about non-violence and doing no harm as first principle. But I want to remind you that there is this idea of doing no harm in our medical system. When young people pass their degrees, medical degree, and are leaving the universities and preparing to go in the medical system, become doctors or nurses, they take an oath. It is called Hippocratic oath. That Hippocratic oath is first do no harm. I think that is a wonderful oath. And this is why we value our doctors and nurses and medical staff, because they are always in the service of the poorest. They don't look at the person and say, are you poor or rich? They don't look at the person, they say, are you black or white? They don't look at the person, they say, are you educated or uneducated? They don't look at people and say, are you American or Russian or Chinese or Indian or Pakistani or African or what, European? They see as a person, as a human being. Every person, whoever comes to the doctor, is a human being, and they will treat without discrimination, without thinking, rich, poor, black, white, educated, uneducated, whatever religion, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever, whoever you are. I think that is a wonderful Hippocratic oath that doctors take. I would like, on the day of this World Values Day, to suggest and propose that not only doctors, but everyone should take this oath, Hippocratic oath. When we begin our career and we go into our jobs and our work, we take this Hippocratic oath that I will be free to do anything I want. It's a complete freedom. But one thing I will not do is do no harm, either to myself or to anybody else among people, and to nature. Whether you are an economist or a business leader or a politician or a scientist or a farmer, whoever you are, why Hippocratic oaths should be only for the doctors? What is so different between doctors and lawyers or accountants or bankers or politicians or economists? Everyone should take this oath. When you leave the university, as doctors do, everyone should say, I will do no harm to other people. And that no harm, if we take that oath of no harm, then of course, all our problems of climate change, biodiversity diminishing, polluted oceans, poisoned soil, animals in factory farms, where cows and chickens and pigs in their hundreds of thousands in big factory farms in America and Australia and Europe and even in India, where these animals see never even the light of the day in their whole life. How we are treating animals so violently. So on this World Values Day, I would like to propose just one value. Just one value. All other values will fall in their place. One value. And that value is value of non-violence. Value of doing no harm. Then nature is abundant. Nature is wonderful. There is no shortage of energy. We put so much violence in digging land thousands and thousands of feet and meters down the underworld and get this dark energy, coal, oil, gas, all this dark energy, energy from the underworld. I call it energy from the hell. And when you take energy from the hell, what do you create on earth? Hell on earth. So energy from the hell, obtained violently by intruding, impinging in the rights of nature. We all talk about the human rights. Of course, I believe in human rights. Of course, I uphold the human rights. I want all human rights to be there and all human beings to be treated with dignity, of course. But I don't stop there. When I take the principle of non-violence, I also talk about rights of nature. And when you impinge and violate the rights of nature, you get global warming and climate change. And so we have to stop taking energy from the hell, from underworld, from the oil wells and the coal mines. We have to stop that. And we have to take energy from the heaven. The energy coming from the sun, energy coming from the wind, energy coming from the rain, free of charge. You don't have to pay a penny to take the energy from the sun. You don't have to pay a penny. Clouds bring water to every field, every home, every country, every region of the world without any use of fossil fuel. If clouds can travel around the world, taking so much water from the oceans and distributing to the world without any charge, that's the energy from heaven. So let us use energy from the heaven, then we can create heaven on earth. Very simple. This is the principle of Hippocratic oath. This is the principle of non-violence. This is the principle of doing no harm. Then nature is abundant. There is no shortage of energy in the world. Shortage of energy is created by the economist and the industrialist and the profit maximization, economic growth. When I'm in my garden and I have 15 apple trees, I'm no shortage of apple. But when I go in the supermarket, there are shortage of apples. In the field, there's no shortage of food. There's no shortage of grapes, no shortage of rice, no shortage of wheat. But only in the shops you get shortage, scarcity. So nature is abundant. I put one seed in the ground of an apple tree. And that one seed, just one single seed of quarter-inch, has given me thousands upon thousands upon thousands of fruit, apples, for last 20 years. There is the abundance of nature. There is no scarcity. The scarcity is the creation, a figment of imagination, and creation of our economic growth-oriented, profit-oriented capitalist system. There is no scarcity. There is abundance in nature. We have to just take that nature's gift with gratitude and not own it. We have to shift from ownership to relationship. Relationship is non-violence. Ownership is violent. No ownership, only relationship. We don't own the land. We don't own the animals. I don't own in my body. I don't even own my voice. It's a gift from the universe. Use the gift from the universe and give back as a gift back to the universe. In Bhagavad Gita or some in Hindu Sanskrit language, we say, Tadiyam vastu govinda tobhyameva samarpaye. So I say, oh universe, everything I receive from you, the sun, the rain, the wind, the food, the forest, the trees, everything I receive from the universe, and I give back to the universe. This is called circular economy. Non-violent economy is a circular economy, not a linear economy. At the moment, we have violent economy because we take from nature, like underworld, mining, forest, deforestation, and so on, use it and throw it away in the waste, landfills, plastic in the ocean. This waste is violence. But in a circular economy, which is economy of nature, economy of nature is a circular economy, cyclical economy. The seed becomes a tree, and tree has flowers and fruit and leaves, and in the autumn they go back to the soil. Whatever comes from the soil goes back to the soil. Tadiyam vastu govinda tubhyameva samarpaye. Soil, I receive from you, I give it back to you. And in the process, I feed the animals, I feed the humans, I feed the worms, I feed the wasps, I feed the bees, I pollinate, I do everything as a service to humanity, a service to all living beings. And then I give everything back to you. What a beautiful economy of nature. We human beings think that we are educated. We are Harvard, Yale, Cambridge, Oxford, University of Delhi, Jawaharlal University, this university, that university. But all the problems we face today are created by the highly educated elite of the world. This educational system is teaching people to be violent. We have to teach our university students to be non-violent, to be kind, to be generous, to be compassionate, to be loving to everything. Then universe will provide for everything. So in this day of values, World Day of Values, I offer you one value, one simple, perennial, long-lasting, ever-present. I'm not saying anything new. So always we have heard about non-violence from all our sages and religions and prophets and Jesus Christ, the Buddha, Lao Tzu, Muhammad, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, Bangari Mathai. Everybody has given us this value, but we have not adopted it. We have not practiced it. So let us go to the world and say, everyone must take the oath of Hippocratic oath and oath of non-violence, and then the world will look after us nicely, and we will look after the world nicely. It's a mutuality, it's a reciprocity, it's a gift economy, it's economy of nature, and this economy of nature has been going on for billions of years. Earth can sustain itself. Earth is self-organizing, self-managing, self-healing system. Gaia, James Lovelock's theory of Gaia. Gaia is a wonderful living organism. We think of the nature and Earth as a dead rock, but Earth is not a dead rock. Earth is a living organism. It's a living being. And so if we can have that respect for nature and the dignity of nature and nature rights as human rights we have, then I think we can solve the problem of climate change. No technology, no kind of scientific discovery can be a complete answer. Technology is a partial answer. Of course, we need technology, but this goes only a certain way. It cannot go all the way. Our attitude has to change. Our values have to change. And those values change is the value of from violence to non-violence, from harming to no harming. If you can have that value, then I think your World Day of Values will be a great success. So please advocate Hippocratic oath for everyone. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Satish, for that very powerful insight and deliverance. And I'm sure it will enlighten all to respect nature more in the future. Thank you very much for that.
You are welcome.
Yeah. Today we have with us our youngest speaker, Aditya Shandilya, who is 15 years old and a student of the famous Heritage School in Kolkata, India, to give his perspective on the topic and how the youth should act on the same. Aditya.
Thank you for that introduction, sir. I would like to thank all the esteemed personalities and guests who are present here today. I would also like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak here on this distinguished platform about World Values Day, a topic that I feel is very important, especially for people of my age. We live in a world where compassion is slowly being rooted out by self-obsession. A world where people are willing to lose their integrity and honor just to earn more money and to gain power. A world where obesity and torpor plague the population. A world where the people are either so rich that they can afford everything or so poor that they are just struggling to survive. A world where the pressure of existing and surviving takes away the ability of one to love their life, their world, and especially themselves. In these dark times, many have realized the futility of their way of life. When they have finally realized that life is not a race to be run and finished as quickly as possible, but a stroll through the forest of existence, something to be enjoyed and cherished rather than be missed. This day, World Values Day, is important as it reminds us that it is the right values and beliefs, not the materialistic ones, but the humanist ones, that lead to a life to remember, a life to inspire, and above all, despite the difficulties it may have, a life worth living once more. It is one's values that constitute their beliefs, attitude, and behavior. It is one's values that are the foundation for their personal, work, and social life. We have seen most of our parents being stuck in the cycle of work life, a 9-to-5 job from which they come back tired and sleep, only to wake up and continue this cycle of life for their own reasons. It may be to provide their child's education, to fund the hospital bills of their parents, heck, even to buy the latest car. They continue to chase the goal of money only to realize in the latter half of their life that they wasted time on so much that just didn't matter anymore. For them to realize that their wealth didn't actually amount to happiness, for them to finally pass on, sapped of strength and regretful of the life they have lived, only for the younger generation to repeat this when they grow old, continuing the cycle of people living lives that in the end they find dissatisfying. Our generation also forgets the effect and importance of nature in our everyday lives. My father always reminisces about his younger days when he was able to freely play near the jungle, when he would climb trees with his brothers in order to pluck fruits, and when he would bring strange pets to his house, including a snake once. My mother too reminisces about her younger days when she would go on an early morning jog with her dog named Brandy, when she would play in the forest with her siblings, and when she would organize picnics with her friends. They say that it was Mother Nature that inspired them to grow and flourish into the human beings they are, and also provided them with some of the best memories of their life. But now, these stories have become rarer in the present day. Most of us prefer to spend time in the concrete jungle rather than the natural one. We prefer to go to malls, play computer games, and go clubbing. We have become so preoccupied with the stress of studies and hardships of work that most either break it or make it, there being nothing in between. Spending time in nature helps ease our mind, calm our nerves, and just be free from the restrictions of modern society, as well as teaching us one of the most important lessons of life: balance. I personally love going to the wildlife sanctuary of my hometown, or even going to the jungle right behind my grandparents' house. I am happy to say that I have parents who wish for me to grow up into a humble, integral, and compassionate person. I am happy that I spend the younger years of my life near Mother Nature, but I have seen others who are not. So I implore all of you here to see yourself and your surroundings, to try to make yourself better than you already are by learning the essential tenets of life, to try and spend as much time as possible in the unjudgmental, free, and caring arms of Mother Nature, to try and be mentally and physically strong. Try to show kindness to those less privileged than you. Try to be a better version of yourself in every small aspect of your life, whether it be how you treat your family or how you hold yourself in public. Just try. When I was thinking of what to say here, I came across a quote from Albert Einstein that I think fits perfectly here. Try not to become a man of success, but rather a man of value. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Aditya, for the lovely insight on values and reconnecting with nature. And I'm sure that the youth will definitely practice the same to create a better world while protecting Mother Earth. Thank you very much. We've just heard such distinguished speakers speaking about the values and the core of what we are, including reconnecting with nature, the fundamental things that need to be present in our lives for us to feel happy, satisfied, and motivated. They are our motivation, our drivers, the passion in our hearts, and the reason why we do the things we do. Values are basically like fingerprints. Nobody's are the same, but you have them all in everything you do. Where there is education, there should be character. Where there is science, there should be humanity. Where there is commerce, there should be ethics. We must sow the seeds of happiness and values. It will take time to grow, but without values, education is incomplete. As we are nearly over time, I would like to once again thank all our speakers who have taken out their valuable time to celebrate World Values Day 2021 and enlightening us on so many crucial and important issues, and our lovely audience who's here present. I would like to end our webinar today with a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, who said, "Keep your thoughts positive because your thought becomes your words. Keep your words positive because your words become your behavior. Keep your behavior positive because your behavior becomes your habit. Keep your habits positive because your habits become your values. And keep your values positive because your values become your destiny." I'm sure you will all put up all the learnings today into action by integrating values in your daily lives to create a better world by integrating and connecting with nature. Thank you once again for being with us to celebrate this great occasion, World Values Day. Thank you so much.